very much. Thank you for inviting me here, because I understand that CyberCamp is a great thing, and it's great that you're here today. I hope you enjoyed my presentation and hope we all learn a little something. I don't know if you can project the image. This is the little bit of a presentation of what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about what you can see there. It's like a current, like a river that's flowing through the internet. And it's basically the quantity of information that flows on the net every day, millions and millions of data. And our data is amongst that data. We use a number of services for enjoyment, web pages for information, social media, and they all have data channels. I'd like to talk a little bit about the presentation, as I'm not going to give a class and talk about things that you may not already know. I just want to share a user experience. Perhaps this user does have a bit of a technical knowledge, but it's about reflecting on how we use the internet and how information is left on the cloud so that companies, businesses, organizations can use as they wish. I want this presentation to be a little bit for everyone. Perhaps more technical profile members of the audience will find that it's not as technical enough for them, but I'd like to reach out to everybody. So, how many of you here today use social network? Maybe you could raise your hands. I can see that most do. Out of those of you who do use them, how many of you use Twitter? Okay, a few less. I'm asking this because we're going to do a little bit of an experiment, and I will need a volunteer, somebody who uses Twitter, to come up and help me, and we can show something. And this is part of the presentation. So if you have a Twitter account and you'd like to be a volunteer, when the moment comes, then please make yourself available. So let me begin with the presentation. First of all, I would like to give a brief presentation of my day-to-day, so that you get an idea of who I am, since we're going to be spending a little bit of time together this morning. So what do I do in my day-to-day currently? First of all, I spend time with my family. I'm married. I've got a very young child called Isabel, and this takes up a great deal of my time. I also work in FIBE, as they mentioned earlier on, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my trajectory over these last 12 years. I've been working in a technical field in software development, and a few years ago I just thought, I really want to have a change. And I changed to communications and relations, and obviously that has nothing to do with what I was doing before in development. Why did this happen? Sometimes I think it's good to make a change, and the moment came for me, and I'm really pleased. I'm learning a lot, and I'm just telling you that so that you understand a little bit more about my presentation. There might be more technical little bits, but I'll concentrate a little bit more on social media and so on a little bit in other sections. And the last picture you can see, that which is Legio 7. It's a kind of personal project, a kind of portfolio. And after spending all day on the computer, I go home and I go on the computer. And I do tests to create different things. I also like photography and videos, and everything goes into that project. And these are the three things that take up all my time in the day-to-day. Obviously, I go to the bathroom and I sleep as well, but these are the things that I spend most of my time doing. And whilst some of you might think that I was going to talk about in theory and what we do here, what I'm going to talk about a little bit is about experiments and little things that I do in Legio 7 and experiences using social media as well.
Una de las cosas que tengo con Legio 7, que bueno,
with Legio 7, people tell me that I'm a little bit crazy because I do have a bit of an issue with creating brands. And this is something that I do. I invent names, I follow social media, like giving things names. And I'm saying this because you will see that on several occasions in the presentation, I will mention several acronyms, and you might be thinking, oh, what's going on with this guy? What's up with him creating names? And just to let you know that that's why. And actually, I'm going to present what I've called CPNR, which basically means creation of unprofitable projects. In my spare time, I create things that do not necessarily bring any money in. These are projects and experiments that I do just because I enjoy learning. I like experimenting, trying new things, and I recommend that you should all do the same things. Perhaps you don't get anything in particular from it, but it's a learning process, and you can link that to other projects in the future and make the most of it. You will see different terminology as we go through the presentation. In all of these projects that I do in Legio 7, I'm thinking particularly of one on this particular case, and you'll see why I don't make any money out of them and what my colleagues say about me. But I like to share my ideas. One is called Gift Guru. What do I intend with this project? So based on the Twitter user, which is why I was mentioning that at the beginning, a person gives me the name of a user, and I am able to generate a lot of ideas about that person. So what's the idea here? So I use the Twitter API, and these are the roads that we were talking about before. There's loads and loads of data. This project is a way of making the most of that information. So with Gift Guru, as I was saying, and you can see an image of that there on the abstract. I put in the nickname for the user, and directly I receive a number of proposals of what that user likes. So how do we do that? Some people might say I use the Twitter API to see what kind of messages a person puts in and to use that to see what a person likes or does not like, but it doesn't exactly work quite like that. Gift Guru hasn't come from nothing. There was a prior project and didn't make any money out of it, but it was called Follow Tags. It was also based on Twitter. It was using a user name. There are a number of different tags based on that person's profile. So to find out what that person is interested in, we'll look at this in a minute too. Now I'm going to show you how follow tags work so that you can understand what I'm thinking about with Gift Guru. And I do need a volunteer for this. I don't know if anybody here in the room would like to get involved to see how that cloud works and whether or not it fits into that person's profile. Does anybody fancy that? Do we have a microphone around somewhere so that we can hear the person, the volunteer? First of all, thank you very much for volunteering. This is a very experimental project, but I'd like to explain and show you this part. What's your name? My name is Sergio. And I'm on Twitter.
Sergio Villa.
So you said Sergio
Ruiz
Ruiz Villa.
No sé si lo veis. Bueno, amplío un poco.
I don't know if you can see that. I'll try and make it a little bit bigger.
Vale. Espero que salga bien, ¿eh?
I hope this works. Hope it doesn't give me any kind of error.
Vale, pues lo que veis aquí, básicamente,
So what you can see here,
no sé si Sergio
basically,
se siente
I don't know if Sergio feels that this is familiar. Obviously, this is an experimental project, and there's some things that I have to work on. Obviously, Gmail is not an interest, but I don't know if all the other things fit with your profile, Sergio. You can be honest. Yes, I think it does more or less fit with me. Obviously, as I said, this is very experimental, and it's just to explain a little bit about the presentation that I'm going to give. There are a number of things that we do on the internet, using services and so on, and we don't realize that we're creating a profile or indicating a number of interests. This happens with Twitter, but also with many other services. I'll explain a little bit about how this is done. I'll go over the technical things a little bit quicker. And I also need to change back to the presentation. I'll leave the technical bits to one side. So we have Gift Guru. It's very, very simple. It's not complex at all. So anybody with a bit of a technical knowledge can understand. There's a PHP that connects to the IP of Twitter. And I don't analyze all the tweets in each user. I extract all the bios from that profile, and the words that I take out from there are the ones that I have identified. I've been doing several tests, and it does tend to coincide with the type of profile that we're looking at and the type of preferences and interests that a person has. If somebody follows football players or football teams, then that information would come up. And this is basically, as I was saying before, is what gives us another concept. And it's called an aware trail in the internet, on the internet. That is, that we don't realize we're leaving a trail behind us on the internet. And this allows a third party, as I was mentioning before in the example, to extract information. I'm going to give you another small example that happens in our day-to-day. It's a very simple concept. It's not a great deal of engineering. It's a proxy server. I'll explain this in a minute, what a proxy server is. And on the right-hand side, what you're going to see is a mobile device. On this case, it's an iPhone, and I'm going to interact with that iPhone. You can see that the Marca page has come up, and these are connections to different places on the internet. You can see Twitter, you can see the different collection of connections that have been made. It's not only content, but images as well. We are connecting to different services that take all our activity and use that. What I would like to tell you is that when we interact using a mobile, we're not just accessing a specific service or content. We are also, in addition to making that request, we are also connecting to other services. And what those services do is to collect the activity that we have gone through on the internet, just so that we are aware of this. And one of the things I'd like to point out in the conclusions, when I come to them today, is that we need to be aware of the use that we make of the internet, and this unaware part, the part that we are unaware of and don't realize, and to see how this is used and what information entities can have about me.
And I'm going to tell you now the main reason why I've called this data fever, this presentation. Now, this picture you can see here is from the early 20th century, and it's related to the gold fever. That's why I've called this presentation data fever. And since the 19th century, there were certain streams and tendencies where whole families were changing places in mass, going to river streams, to gold mines because of the gold fever, and they were trying to find the famous gold bits. This trend that was going on during the 19th century, and this is why I wanted to make a link here, because nowadays we have streams, we have torrents of data, which could be a river at the time of the gold fever. We have mines and loads of data that are there to be exploited. So I think data, which is the gold of today, we have here on the left. So during the gold rush, families would change their home so that they could find gold. And now we have companies and many others who are doing more or less the same so that they can extract gold, which is, but for example, you can see that I've called it your personal preferences and tastes. That is personal data as well, and this is very valuable. When we talk about Facebook, we'll see it, because sometimes I think this is much more valuable than what we think is personal data, because from here we can actually extract interests or key factors for a company to be able to sell us their products or services. Now, how much are our data worth? How much is everything worth? There are different theories. Some companies have had research that say that every single one of our bits of data can be worth 18 euros, and some surveys on the street, people have said that it could even be 30 euros each piece of data. It's very complicated. I've been looking at different sources, and I have tried to extract an average for reference, which is around 10 euros. But if we think that every single piece of data, tastes, preferences is worth 10 euros, take into account the amount of people who use the internet every day, and then think about the amount of money that this could bring. And so you will see the business of data right there. Everything is free nowadays on the internet. One of the things that someone finds when they start using the internet is that they can access many services for free. And many people actually think that is the best thing about the internet, that everything is free. I see it with my parents, for example. My dad, when he started using the internet, he was used to having his newspaper on his table every day. And when he started using the internet, well, I don't understand. Newspapers offer all the information for free. I don't have to pay. I just see the headlines from different media, and I don't have to pay anything for it. And that's when you explain, you say, well, they're not charging you anything, but there's advertising behind it, and that's where they get the money from. And that advertising, as we're going to see afterwards, is presented to us according to the data that they're gathering from our internet usage. You know that sometimes you're on a website and you find an Amazon ad on the product that you've just been looking for. So this is something that they use on the internet to sell products and services to us. So basically, I think we've all thought about this at some point. It's not that things are for free on the internet. It's basically that all the information that we are giving to the network is giving information to companies to offer us products and services. And this is the best example of what I'm going to tell you now. Now, as I was saying earlier, I really do like thinking about new projects, innovative projects, and I have a friend called Guillermo, and he has asked me to come up with an idea for him, and I've thought this brand, I don't know if it looks familiar to you, the typography, the colors, I think it's quite good, isn't it? Basically, what I thought is that Guille could be the personal assistant of any client. And what is Guille going to do? He's going to be 24/7 with the client and go with them all the time, just next to them with a notebook. And when they go shopping, that's why I tell him, you just go there with your notebook and you go with them. Every day you help them with the day-to-day activities, and you're with, so your client is with Guille and says, Guille, what do they have on at the cinema tonight? Well, there's a Star Wars film. Oh, great. Guille, how can I get to the cinema? Well, look, I'll tell you how you can get there. Just continue 200 meters and then at the roundabout, take a right. And Guille is writing everything down on his notebook as they go. But it's not only that, because Guille is 24/7 with his clients. So on a Monday morning, when the client leaves home to go to work, Guille, without even asking him anything, will say, oh, you've got 8 minutes until you get to work. There's no traffic jams. And the client will say, wow, this is great. Guille is great. He knows where I'm going without me telling him. But of course, Guille has everything written down on his notebook. He's 24/7 with the client. He knows exactly what the client knows. He can even foresee what the client is going to want. He can anticipate because he has all this information. But not only that, he is going to anticipate, and when the client wants to go for dinner to a restaurant, is going to say, oh, what did you think about this restaurant? This is really, really important for me because I can help other clients. And the client will say, wow. So he counts on me for these things as well. Oh, and if you have pictures, by the way, you could give it to me so that I can show it to other clients. I don't know if you see the comparison. I'm obviously talking about Google. Sorry, Google people, if this is a bit obvious, but this is how it works. Google is for free, yes, but we are sharing our life with Google. And obviously, they're using that in the benefit in order to then offer us products and services. And that's what their business is about. So when I try to explain this to my dad, I use examples such as this one about Guille, so that he knows that this is not for free. We're actually sharing our life on the internet when using those services. Now, talking about Google, I'm also saying, just in case you don't know, my activity google.com is a site where you can actually see, if you are logged in with your username, everything that all the information they're gathering about you, you can actually filter depending on services. You can see what Maps is storing about you, what Gmail is storing about you, and with all due respect to Google, I'm not talking on behalf of Encibe here, by the way, I'm just talking on behalf of myself. It's not all there, because when I go on Maps, I see that all the activity is not there on that side, because otherwise it wouldn't be able to tell me that I will be at work in 8 minutes next Monday. So, but, well, you do have that possibility of seeing or having really an idea of what they're storing, the information that they're storing about you. Now, another term that I would like to introduce you to that I think it's really important as well, and I'm saying this from the point of view of technician, and you know that sometimes those who are more technical and know how the internet works forget about how this works, and I do recognize and acknowledge that sometimes I see the privacy policy and I just don't read it. When I go on a site, I just don't read it. I'll show you examples afterwards. So what happens when you accept the T's and C's of everything that you use on the internet, you playing their game. And that is a reality. When you create user on any service on the internet and you say, I agree to the terms and conditions and the privacy policy, then you are giving away your gold, the gold we were talking about before. You're giving them permission to say, here, this is me, this is my daily activity, use it and do whatever you think fit with it. And it's important to know that this is so. So we usually think there's nothing illegal, there's nothing unethical about all those policies. And although I myself don't do it sometimes, I think we should all check those policies from time to time, because I think some things might actually surprise us. And it's actually not uncommon. I'm going to tell you a story about one day when I just wanted to, I was just fuming, like that man you see in the picture. Well, I was using Runtastic one day. I don't know if you know it. I went running, or well, whatever you can call what I do, which is not really running. But something happened. When I finished, I went to the supermarket and I went shopping. I didn't realize that I hadn't stopped the activity of Runstatic, and I didn't realize either that my Facebook account had actually published something saying, encourage Raul with his running. I wasn't aware of this, and so my friends started making fun of me because they realized that all of a sudden the map was showing the supermarket and walking on Zets and walking in a really weird way. If you could see the amount of comments that they were saying, oh, don't forget the fruit, don't forget the meat, there's an offer, there's something on offer here and there. I was so angry when I realized that obviously by default, just using this application to do sports, by default, I had agreed to sharing all this information on Facebook. Well, as I was saying, you know, people who usually know about these things don't do it. I am the first one to be a culprit of this, but I think it is really important that we do think about it from time to time. Now, how many of you have read The Little Prince? What do you think? It's a classical book, short book. What would you say if I offered a service on the internet and said, but before you use my service, you have to read The Little Prince? Say I wrote something, oh, I have read and accepted The Little Prince. Imagine also that this is a service that you really need right now and you have to use right now. Would you read The Little Prince before using the service? Probably not, because it's 13,682 words. I know it's short, it's something that you read quite fast, but you're not going to read The Little Prince for something, a service that you need right now, something that you're going to read right now. This would be a way of getting your users away. But this is reality, and I insist, I don't want to point fingers or anything, I'm just stating a fact. I have translated the number of words of The Little Prince to the privacy policies of some of the services that we use. So if for Instagram, before using it, you would have to read 1.22 Little Princes. For Google, 2.18 Little Princes. And for Microsoft, 2.66 books of The Little Prince. And, well, I understand that these companies have to go into detail as to what using your data implies, but I think there's much room for improvement here, because it is not right that in order for me to be able to use a service and have the guarantee that I know what's going to happen with my data, I have to read all of that. That is way too much. I understand that it's a free service, I understand that that's how they make a living, but I think from the point of view of the user, there's a lot of room for improvement here. You have to read the policies. I am the first one who doesn't do it sometimes. I know they have to go into detail, but it's the fact that companies do think about this as well. And they have to think about this as well. Now, this is another one of my projects. See what you reckon. I've called it Facebar. I don't know if you like the logo and the color. So my idea is to have a bar, a pub, where friends can gather. I will give them everything for free. If they want a pint, if they want anything, I'll give them for free. that point. The only thing I will ask from them is to sign T's and C's when they come in, and everything will be for free. The only thing I will ask in exchange is that I'm going to go round the groups of people who are in my pub, and I'm going to be with my notebook and write down everything they talk about, everything they like, and because obviously I need to make a living as well, and I'm giving them drinks for free, the only thing I'm going to ask from them is that when they're having a drink, from time to time, they let me see something about a trip that they've done recently, or if, for example, if they are interested in technology, I can give them an offer or two on technology products that they might buy, or, you know, any other thing that they want to buy but they're not sure about which one to get, then I will give them something, and then the companies, if they buy from them, will pay me. So with all due respect to Facebook, this is a business model. So when we accept using Facebook, that's what we're playing at. All that activity, all the way we have of showing things that we like, expressing different things, is actually drawing a profile. And that's how Facebook directs their advertising to us. And that's what we're going to talk about, how they do that and how we are helping them do it. This is probably the most advanced advertising strategy in the world, because you're going to your target audience directly, and unless you do it like that, and I don't work for Facebook, I'm not selling anything to do with Facebook, but this is what we are becoming. We are perfectly classified people. They have our full profile, and I'm just going to show you an example so you understand what I'm talking about. I imagine some of you will try it. When you start an advertising campaign on Facebook, you can segment so much and target such a specific group of users that it would blow your mind. It's not just choosing gender or age groups, but you can actually state where exactly you want the people to live, for example. And the most important thing is what you're seeing here. Interests. So you can actually target your ad to people who like things like, for example, paella. And by the way, I don't know if you know, but over 5 million people on Facebook are very interested in paella, because I did this trial before I brought you this presentation. So what does this do? This based on our activity on the internet, allows companies to target their advertising campaigns. Raul, one of my colleagues at Encibe, who hasn't made it today and who is working with me to see how this works, we have seen together that the good thing for a company about this is that once you have created a campaign targeted at people living in Valencia who like paella, imagine I sell stock to make paella, so I'm going to target them. So what Facebook will allow you, if you're a company selling stock, those users on which you have had, on who you have had an impact, you can use again in the future. So this is further segmenting. So you're not only targeting people who like paella now, you're going to target the people who already liked what you had. And then you can target more and more. So you cannot tell me that this is not a gold mine for companies. And this is what I was trying to say earlier. Just because we're using Facebook, we are allowing them to do that. I just want you to be aware. I don't want to scare you. I don't want you to stop using Facebook. I just want you to know that when we use the service, and I am the first one who should be aware of this, that this is the way it works.
That doesn't take anything from what I've said. So when I tell this to people, suddenly they all say, oh, I'm not going to use Facebook anymore. Obviously, that's an option. But we need to be mainly aware of this. Think about The Little Prince from time to time. What else happens in Facebook? And this is what I do call a risk. It's people who systematically accept people as friends on Facebook. And basically, because they're unaware of what this implies, I'm sure you're aware of some issues that have come up in the past with leaks of information through Cambridge Analytics. An application was prepared, and it was used by 240,000 people on the internet. And just by using that, there was access to another 70 million people users in the US. So all the users and all the users in both places, all the data was accumulated. And this is related to what I was saying here. As soon as you accept a person on Facebook as a friend, you give that person permission to have all the information about you. And I find this surprising. And this leads me to another project, a personal project of mine. And of course, this is a personal project, not an INCIBE project. Perhaps I can talk a little bit more about this in another talk, but I did a little bit of a test about accepting friendships in Facebook just to see what would happen. And all of a sudden I had 2,560 friends, friends that I've known forever, apparently. And I think people need to be aware of the configuration of terms of privacy of Facebook, because as soon as you say yes, you're giving access to people to all the information, and these are people that you don't know. And many people are unaware of this and share things easily. So coming a little bit now to the conclusions, and then we'll have time for some questions as well. It would be great that whenever we use an online service that we were capable of going from an automatic mode to being aware of the trail that we leave behind, being aware of the activity that we have online, and being aware that it can be used by a third party in order to offer us services. At the end of the day, all the information that we share is what makes everything free. Sometimes it's also a good idea to read The Little Prince, as we were saying, and to be aware of all the conditions that we are accepting. And, of course, don't accept friendships when you don't know a person, like in the example that showed me before. So to give you a little bit of information, this is not only on web pages and on internet, but also in any kind of device. And now with the Internet of Things, we're always connected to the internet. So this is why privacy settings are so important. Everything is connected. The other day, I was thinking a little bit about the number of connected services that I have. I'm an active user of the internet, but I do have quite a number of active services and ones that are connected to each other. And I was thinking about that, about the image that could be created of me, as a little bit what we were talking about earlier on, our trail on the internet. Many of those services I could surely do without, and I'm sure there are many that we don't use. I'm sure that's my case. This is basically what I wanted to transmit this morning. I don't know if you have any questions or any comments that you would like to make. I'd be happy to receive any comments. If not, well, thanks again. Oh, yes, we do have a question from the floor. Raul, congratulations for your presentation. It had some very excellent ideas. I've been involved in talks and training regarding future activity in cybersecurity. And one of the ideas is actually based on people themselves. You were talking about how to retain privacy, and I think this is going to be one of the main ideas for people specializing in the field of cybersecurity. Yes, I absolutely share your opinion. It's everything that we've been talking about. Our activity in the day-to-day is information that is available, and if we don't control that privacy and the privacy settings that we were talking about, something we haven't actually spoken about default settings, but we have to be aware of that. One of the issues with security comes from devices on which we don't change the default settings. Or, as I was saying before, we install an app and we don't understand the permission that we're giving. We're giving permission to share on Facebook and so on, and we're unaware of that. So in our day-to-day, it's about interaction, because internet is part of our day-to-day activities, and we're very much unaware of what we're doing. And I wanted to share that I absolutely agree with what you were saying. It's all about people. And yesterday's talk about the same subject, we're talking about family members as well, and cyber crime, and how you need to move in this field with regards to children who are going on the internet and so on. What do you think about this? It's a question of perhaps not creating that responsibility so that it doesn't fall on just one person. You need to accompany and guide young people, and that's an incredibly important point. Thankfully, there are people who control those areas, and sometimes if people don't act in good time, then it can become a very complex issue. Yes, that happens with children, and also in general with people who are not commonly and usually in contact with devices. My father, for example, doesn't know much about the internet, but he goes online and he doesn't understand when he gets a virus on his computer, for example. He doesn't realize, and he's maybe causing an issue, a safety issue, and that happens with children, of course. And it's also a very sensitive issue. We have to be alongside our children. We have to accompany them and explain things to them. Explain things to them in a positive way, because we can't scare them away. And neither can we prohibit them from accessing the internet. It's standard practice for them to use services and devices. But we do have to be with them in order to set up that configuration for privacy, and as tutors and parents we have to control that, and they need to be able to tell us about things and ask us for advice as well. Educating children in this field is something that we need to do in our everyday, in the same way that we teach them other things. A colleague of mine has a very good example of that, the way that we talk to children about how to walk on the streets and how to be safe on the streets and to be careful on the bike lane and so everything. In the same way that we explain things to them about being safe on the streets, we have to explain to them also how to be safe on the internet. I absolutely agree with everything that you've said. Thank you. And I'm glad that I was able to be here today to listen to you. Has anybody else got anything they would like to add? No? Well, oh yes, we do have somebody down on the floor who would like to add something. Hello, thank you very much. Obviously, companies are using data, not only Facebook and Google, and we are unaware of everything that they take from us, but there are also even students doing higher-level studies that use data. Yes, this is something to do with the APIs that's talking to you about before. there is a part of services that you can use to consult information. Things are changing a little bit in the case of Facebook as a result of the Cambridge Analytics issue. Things have changed a little bit. It's not so open. But with the API on Facebook many years ago, you had an absolute gold mine. You could get a lot of information about any user. But nowadays, access is a little bit more restricted. But there are options, there still are options to obtain information. In order to obtain information from Twitter, like we were talking about before, it was just an experiment. It was very simple. Just going into the API for Twitter, I could get that information just looking at a person's profile. And that happens in lots of different areas, and the APIs that offer these services do give you that option. The philosophy is changing a little bit, and they're trying to be increasingly aware of the information that they're giving out, because it's also a question of their reputation. Obviously, in Facebook, the use of information and data has damaged it very much, but there is actually nothing illegal in connecting to a third-party service and using an API, and you have the permission to do that. So can a company legally integrate that access into its services in its network? If it's using an open API in Facebook or any other kind of service, I don't know if you're referring to any particular one, but in Facebook, that information is public, and people give permission to be exposed to that API. So when you accept the conditions, then people are saying to you, well, you know that third parties may access your information. If that privacy policy is being included, then you're giving your permission for use of that information, which is why it's so important that we should not do. And I'm the first to hold up my hand and say that I don't do it. We do need to look into this and see what people are doing with our data. User information can be public, and what people are doing is also public. So it's not personal data, but it is data that I can play with, and it's public, it's not illegal. You're making a user profile based on what is out there on the internet, and people have said, yes, okay, this is something that can be shown. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well, but I think the limit is there. It's based on the user conditions. That's where the limit is. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have another question from the floor. I don't know what time it is yet, but we have another question. Hello. There are people who don't have social media and feel that they're not exposed to the things that you've mentioned. Is that true? Well, social media is a part of internet. If people don't have social media, but they do have a Gmail and they use Google services, this is what we were talking about before. A profile can be created from that as well. Well, actually, Google does it by default. That's just how it works. That's their business. You create an account and you use Google Maps. It happened to me yesterday, in fact. I was in an area, I can't remember exactly which it was. It's the Arts and Science area of Valencia. And I used Google Maps, and no sooner I got there, but it said everything that you can do in this area. What I mean is that as soon as you use a service, then your data is being used. You may be offered different things. It's implicit in the use of that service. If it were a service which you were paying, then that would be a different thing, and you are being told, I guarantee that your data won't be used, then that's a different matter. This is the model of of how things work. Social media, you can choose not to use them, but there are other services on the internet, and particularly when you install an application and you give access to different components and devices, then companies have a source of data that they can use to offer you different services. So yeah, social media can take you away from one part, but you will use other types of services. If you don't use any kind of services, then that's kind of quite drastic. I don't want to share with anything, but I won't use anything. But it's a personal choice. Obviously, it's an option as well. People can do as they prefer. But it's very important to understand the model and to know what's going on. Every time that we do something like what we've been mentioning, you need to understand what's going on behind. Don't know if that answers your question. Yes, I am on social media, but I know that people who are not, and they believe that they are exposed to the dangers that I'm exposed to. If they don't use any internet services, well, yes, but obviously if they use Google, then that's not the same thing. Whether it's in Apple, whether it's in Google for Android, there is a tiny bit of data there. It's what we were talking about a little earlier on with the server. That's already connections that are going through on the internet about your activity. That activity is being followed, and we can't change that. Thank you. Are there any